When dating, what jobs do you consider a red flag and why? My friend has dated multiple cops in the past, among other professions, just happens to be a coincidence, I think. And they were all terrible people. This was over the course of like 5 years, and by date, I mean a few hinge dates until they said something terrible and she was out. She started dating another cop, and we all assumed the worst. And when I met him, he was actually kind of nice and kind of shy. Years later, they got married and have kids now. This dude cries over the fact that he's a cop and the general public hates him and assumes the worst about him, and he hates what they represent now. I think he actually wanted to be a servant to his community. He wants to quit, but he's close to qualifying for a pension that would be a huge benefit for his family. Once that hits, he's quitting and has some corporate gigs lined up. Not really relevant to this thread, but wanted to share that story. The one good cop she ever dated actually hates being a cop. Go figure. LOL. Yikes. Tell him to shift to the fire department. They actually are helping people. Story 2. I had a psychologist girlfriend many years ago. The first few weeks were bliss. Then slowly the analysis seeped in. Maybe it even started earlier, but now she felt comfortable sharing her voice, and then any slight disagreement is suddenly a massive issue, and it's always your fault. Any difference of opinion is a deep character flaw on your part. She's never wrong because she's a professional and right by default. One anecdote, she was renovating. I offered to paint her window frames in the kitchen, bedroom, and living room. I naively started with the bedroom. That was a mistake because clearly this was territorial behavior on my part. And doing the bedroom, was a sign of me claiming her by marking my territory. And here I was, thinking I did start with the bedroom so it has the most time to air out the fumes before we sleep in it. I was wrong. I do not recommend. Story 3. Seafarer here. I've worked at sea for 48 years, so it's not always easy to meet someone and settle down. I met my wife-to-be when she came on a cruise I was working on. That was 35 years ago. I tried to live a normal life in an office and lasted about 3 months with my wife encouraging me to go back to sea. It takes a very special kind of person to look after a home and raise a family with a husband gone for 6 to 8 months of the year. Kids are grown now, and I only contract maybe 1 or 2 trips now and again if the money is right, $1,000 a day. We're finally enjoying going back to see places I've emailed home about over the years. Story 4. Psychologist here. I'm a psychologist, and I can say that we all tend to go into the field because we carry trauma, and we are often overly invested in the well-being of our clients and don't have enough left over for our partners, especially if our partners are needy, which is exactly the partners we choose because we like to feel needed until it feels suffocating. Also, yes, we diagnose you. We might joke that we don't work for free or make some comment about being off the clock, but if you study and evaluate personality all day, it becomes automatic. The best we can do is try our best to ignore our evaluations and relate to you as a person. I could go on. Story 5. Teachers. I respect the job, we need them, well-funded, but I only met like 2 teachers in my life who I could look up to, and both of them had a lot of life experiences and then chose to become a teacher. The real red flags I started to see are the ones I've met in adulthood, about 5 or 6 people who've been teachers for elementary and secondary schools for their entire lives. I've met them in their 20s to 40s, and each one of them were from different cultures, ethnicities, and genders, yet had a few traits in common. Sense of superiority, a savior complex, self-righteousness, narrow-mindedness, condescending tones and attitudes can be subtle, low social skills with adults around their age. I was unable to make friends with any of them in meetups. I'm sure there are good ones too, but they are unicorns to me to even make friends with them. Story 6. Chefs, cooks. Not always, as one of my closest friends is married to a chef and I love them both. However, a lot of cooks and chefs have short tempers and bad attitudes, yelling, angry, emotional, not able to express emotion through anything other than anger. It's not a constant, but a very high percentage of the cooks and chefs I've met are very angry people. I'd say it was just my experience, but one of the biggest celebrity chefs is a total terrible person. I can't stand it. Not for me. Story 7. Dolphin trainer. I won't fall for that one again. Seriously though, if you're screening by occupation, you might be missing the forest for the trees. The one thing I would say is that anyone who isn't around much is hard to build a connection with. It isn't impossible by any means, but it is a lot tougher. Other than logistical reasons though, I really think you're better off getting to know someone than pretending you know a lot about them from their occupation. Sure, some people are stereotypical for their job role, but a lot of us are just out there trying to earn a crust however we can. Story 8. I get a lot of hate for saying this, and it's not because I disrespect the job they do. Honestly, I have crazy respect for nurses. They work their rears off and get so little in return. They deserve more pay, more PTO, and more coworkers. But I've seen nursing chew people up and spit them out. Many work long hours at odd times, they're on call, they don't get breaks, and they come home ragged. I'm sorry, I'm not strong enough to watch you get eaten alive by your job. You deserve more than you're given. You deserve more than me. I've dated a few nurses, and it's always the same. Wonderful person that I can't stand to watch be chewed up and spit out daily. Story 9. Maybe not so much what kind of jobs except dancers if they work in finance. Yeah, women who work in finance are very strange. But how often does a person change jobs? I used to date a woman who changed jobs 4 or 5 times a year, and she always had an explanation for why. But it turns out she got fired every time because of a very demanding personality, i.e., she messed up everything and it was never her fault. You know the type. It turns out she was that way in our relationship too, so I ended it after 6 months when the honeymoon was over and her real personality started to show itself. Story 10. I worked in the auto industry, car dealership, finance managers. Everyone thinks salesmen. No, a lot of them are actually really nice, extroverted people. Some of the best people I've ever met in my life were salesmen. Some are slammy, sure, but most weren't. Finance managers, literally all pieces of terrible things, all had substance misuse problems and DUIs out the wazoo and cheated on their spouses all the time. The men had kids with 3 or 4 baby mamas, all manipulative as heck to everyone they met. I'm pretty sure most of them would throw a baby off a roof if they got $1,000 out of it. I've worked with maybe 20 of them and only one of them was a decent person. Story 11. Police, UK based, the ones I spoke to/dated saw themselves as better and have zero empathy for anyone, burned out by the parts of society they deal with unfortunately. Plus, the shift work makes it a nightmare. Artists with rich parents, daddy special princess or prince, often zero substance with an inflated ego. Yoga teachers, the yogi to fastest pipeline is real. Scary people. HR girls. My now partner is an HR executive, but I've dated a few HR girls in my time. It's very common for them to have the same issues as police listed above. They are the police of the corporate world. Struck it lucky with my fiance, however. Story 12. 1. Any law enforcement or related. Hard nope. Dating or even hanging out socially is going to present a monster ethical dilemma for both of us. I'll happily kick it with an ambulance worker or firefighter, though. 2. ECE or primary school teacher. It's apparently impossible to turn off the teacher's voice off the clock. 3. Property investor. I'm not talking about someone who owns a rental property and still works a day job. I mean the I own 17 rentals and let property managers deal with them so I can fly off to Belize on a whim type. Story 13. I'd wager at least 75% of female teachers grew up and never left the educational bubble, work in a highly judgmental environment by their peers and bosses, and spend the majority of their time disciplining malleable brains. I'm not trying to overgeneralize, but that environment tends to create a certain personality that's not very pleasant for a down-to-earth man to be around. Luckily, most of them stop talking to you as soon as they realize you aren't a police officer or some other profession they can be humble bragging to every person they meet for the rest of their lives. Story 14. I don't want to judge or stereotype an entire profession, but from personal experience of being in a relationship with one for over 2 years, I'd say a chef. Long hours and irregular ones at that. And the likelihood is if you don't work in hospitality, your hours and days off are going to be really different. He was also a workaholic and would go into work even on days off as he felt like he needed to. And also there's the closeness with other colleagues in the restaurant. They see each other more than they see you, and they bond over the stress and close proximity. So flirting and overstepping boundaries can happen. My ex flirted with an old work colleague and tried to look single to them. He might even be rebounding with a current coworker, possibly a server, just a month after we broke up, lol. I'm aware not all chefs act like this. My ex was also avoidant and emotionally unavailable and immature, so that probably worsened it. Story 15. HR and marketing. I work in IT, and every department in every company is 100% dependent upon myself and my infrastructure coworkers doing our jobs well. But HR and marketing are the most insufferable. Yes, Little Miss Marketing Coordinator, I would love to hear you explain to me why IT is only a cost department and not a revenue-generating department like marketing. Don't forget though, your entire job has moved online and you are entirely dependent on access to the internet to do anything. SEO doesn't mean anything when your computer can't talk to anything. Not to mention I could walk down to the Demarc, cut 2 cables, and the whole terrible company is shut down, but yeah, you're right, IT isn't responsible for making any money. Story 16. I don't mind much what people do for work as long as we could get by and they aren't going above whatever their threshold is. The real major issue job-wise is I don't really want to hear about it all that much. As someone that gets there 40 plus but usually under 50 hours in a week, I have already given my job enough of my time and mental energy, let alone giving more off the clock. I simply don't talk about work very much unless it is something quick in passing or something really major happened to someone. I know not everyone is like that and will want to talk about their whole workday and everyone involved, and I can humor that a bit, but I can't do it all the time and it simply isn't worth it. So yeah, that is my job, red flag, people needing to live work outside of actual work. That's the main reason I have ended relationships, as this sometimes leads to the fact it becomes a hobby for people instead of developing another interest. That's also why I don't hang out with a lot of people from work outside of actual work. You have this thing in common, but there needs to be something else. Story 17. This is going to sound cliche, perhaps because some women love these professions, but police, military, firefighters, day traders, lawyers, except for tort lawyers, and professional athletes. Police and military, the ones I met at least, weren't smart enough to get into college and seem to go into these professions to have power over others. Ditto for correctional officers. They seem to have peaked in high school, energy, and desperately want to have power and remain relevant. They also tend to not be too smart and hate women who are intelligent. The guy I dated who wanted to be a cop became highly controlling, verbally cruel, and threatened me with a gun, ironically enough. Firefighters just look classically in bad shape, ironically enough. Day traders and lawyers I have met were into cocaine heavily, and/or alcoholics, and professional athletes just look at Khloe Kardashian's luck with them as an example. Basically, any slimy, schmarmy profession is a no-go. Story 18. Bankers, emotionally stunted sociopaths, politicians, sleazy, and just you. Adult entertainers, dancers, for obvious reasons. Anything in the humanities is academia. Intellectuals don't seem to me to be the best lovers. Criminals, obviously. School teachers, worse than dating a gossipy woman. Influencers, emotionally stunted. Therapists, sadistic and evil. Most doctors, married to their job. Anyone working on creating GAI, entitled idiots. Actors, histrionic personality disorder. Civil servants, soulless, Stepford, terrible people. Poets and writers, I don't want to date myself. Welcome are engineers of all sorts, coders, cybersecurity wizards, any blue-collar tradesman, some manly job that helps day-to-day things work and be built. Clinical psychologists, if they don't lose the plot, like how Jordan Peterson went from a good clinician and a great professor to a raving lunatic. Story 19. Anything that's anti-science, such as psychic, tarot reader, etc. I also would never want to date a pastor, priest, or any other religious leader since I'm a staunch atheist. Police or military is off the table due to high rates of domestic mistreatment. I wouldn't want someone who works in a career with lots of travel since that would mean less help at home. Any politician is definitely not someone I'd want to date. Lastly, any career that makes very little money. If you're my age, mid-30s, and still making peanuts, then I'm not interested. I don't want a partner who I will have to financially support. Story 20. For me, it would be someone that doesn't have a career. I'm in my 40s. I don't want someone with a job. I want someone with a career. If I were a woman, a day trader, or a crypto bro, this would be an instant red flag for me. If I were a woman, I only say that because I've never met a woman that claimed to be a day trader. I once interviewed a guy who graduated engineering school and then spent the next couple of years day trading while living at his parents' house. Then he decided to be an engineer. Engineers are generally low-risk people. If this guy thinks he's smart enough to make a living day trading, he probably wouldn't be a good engineer. I don't need that kind of ego in my department. Story 21. Adult speech, language pathologists, speech therapists. Why? As an SLP myself, every SLP I've known that works with adults, clinical, hospital setting usually, is single and has a very prickly personality. Maybe it's the stress of working with dying patients with severe illness or the long hours and productivity requirements, but they all seem to have varying degrees of lack of empathy. Pediatric SLPs seem okay and usually have some form of long-term relationships. I am in the latter category. No hate against them, to be clear, they're extremely smart and talented individuals. But man, everyone I've worked with just grinds you into the dirt like it's nothing and seems surprised when it hurts you. Story 22. Anything in psychology or counseling, those people are generally unreasonable and terrible. I used to do marketing and advertising for small businesses, and people in that industry were insufferable, relentlessly picky about meaningless details and never clear about anything and demanding things that would absolutely confuse people and or harm their brand. Just active detriments to themselves in general, and there were often issues with collecting payment. Tradespeople were the best, very direct, honest, and willing to take advice. Everything always went smooth, and they were always happy with the good results they let us produce for them, paid on time every time. Story 23. Cop, military, security guard / bouncer. Wanted to be a cop but couldn't hit that low bar. Social worker or teacher, poor and too much burnout. Also, I was a former teacher. I wouldn't date me either during those years. Writer, producer, actor without a real list of IMDb credits. I live in LA. That's just code for unemployed and lying about it. Bartender, server, theater performer. Too many late nights and weekends. I had a 9 to 5 and didn't want to be with someone whose schedule was opposite mine where we'd never see each other. Anyone in network marketing, i.e. an MLM, anyone who hated their job and complained about it a lot. Didn't matter the job if they hated it and couldn't stop being grumpy about it. That's no fun. Athlete, I'm lazy. I don't want to work out. Their ambition and energy is just going to be too much for me. Story 24. This is purely anecdotal. I'm sure there are some nice guys in IT, but all of my serious relationships from 20 to 35 were with guys in IT. I had an IT adjacent career. I felt like I was on an endless roller coaster of meeting nice guys who had hidden horrible traits that would come out 1 to 2 years in. Hidden alcohol, substances, and intimacy fixation specifically, as well as chronic cheating and physical mistreatment. It's like every IT guy is fixated to something, and eventually he'll fall apart and destroy their relationship with it. A close friend also married an IT guy who was super nice until they married and he harmed her. They're divorced now. Never again for IT guys. I married an actually nice guy. He does title work for land companies. Ladies, get a guy in title work, LOL. Story 25. Therapist, and I'm a therapist. It's not a bad job. It's very important and can make good money. The issue is, and a lot of other therapists find it hard to not psychoanalyze people. We don't do it intentionally, but it's hard to switch off from therapist mode. My partner and I had to really work through this because I would have issues where he'd want me to listen and I would be offering advice, psychoanalyzing, and rationalizing people's actions. He had to be like, babe, I just need you to be present. We worked through it, but it was also a sign of me being super burnt out, having poor work-life balance, and a bump in the relationship. Story 26. Unlicensed vet tech, all the pride of being a healthcare worker but with zero actual training or specialization, makes helping them with anything technical almost impossible. Also, if they tell you they were a substance user for 7 years before getting clean, mention that multiple exes told them very wrongly and rudely they have BPD, and they still have an incredibly codependent relationship with their narcissistic mother who financially supports them in their 30s, run away as fast as possible. Not speaking from experience or anything. Story 27. Nurses. Almost every nurse I've met has this kind of Dunning-Kruger thing that is hard to be around. The types to say, nurses know more than the doctors anyway. Kinda nonsense? Sure, you have a 2-year degree, why would the doctor be the expert there? I know they're not all like that, but I've known enough to know the odds are high enough that I'm not gonna filter through that trash pile. Story 28. I don't know if this is even a thing since streaming, but I wouldn't put your money on professional gamers, RMT guys, Magic the Gathering judges, retro game traders, or game shop owners if they've been open less than 3 years. I feel like people who make their money around the periphery of their special interest hobbies end up being more committed to the hobby than the money, and then the money dries up and they want to move in and not pay rent and help out around the house, i.e. scrounge snacks and game 8 hours a day. This is the cornerstone for a moderately stable hangout house as long as you get some rotation or someone can pay the rent with their trust fund. But if you are the girlfriend first and not the gaming buddy with benefits, you end up being, let's say, marginalized. Story 29. Cat women, hear me out. I don't mean they have a cat they love. I mean the cat gets treated like a child. Very similar to a horse girl. I love cats, but there are levels to it. If the food is being made by hand and every meal has to be prepared to perfection, that sounds sweet until you can never go on vacation, an overnight trip, even the darn beach. Horse girls are way better in my opinion because the horse is not in your house and no one tries to reinvent their diet. But I understand that can have its own issues with travel. Could not be more serious here. Huge red flag. Story 30. No worries, and I feel you when you said you get the business end of the day-to-day stress. That is something I've struggled with as well. We have to compartmentalize, often separating our work persona from our home persona. I'm sure you have seen this. We have to be 2 different people. At work, especially as females, to be taken seriously, we have to adopt a hard-as-nails attitude that may not be as appreciated at home. There have been many times I've gotten home and my husband has asked to talk to Aaron, my name, because he can't deal with MSG. He is retired from the service, so at least he has some background with it, lol. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 31. First responders, police, firefighter, EMT, lawyers, doctors, influencers, sales, life coach. First responders have a bad reputation for being promiscuous. Police, in addition, are more likely to be violent. Lawyers, because I don't want to argue with one primarily, plus they generally work a lot of hours if they are successful. Doctors, because they also tend to work a lot of hours, some can be sleazy and promiscuous. Influencer and life coach, those aren't real jobs. Salespeople are pushy. I'd want someone who has a real job but makes around the same amount of money as me, and that's why I don't want a doctor or lawyer. Story 32. I'm a straight, early 40s female for your information. Influencers, social media marketing, dudes who don't work at all, they just thrift shop and flip for cash. Military, too much machismo, mental health issues, anger, domestic violence, I could go on. ICE or Leos, same reasons as previous, and many just want to hurt people. Bar managers, very flirty environment and everyone sleeps with everyone else. Farmer, I'm a city girl and don't like the smell of manure and I'm allergic to hay and grasses. Gun shop staff, can't bring lead home. Any jobs working with strong chemicals. For example, my friend's husband reeks like gasoline and oil from his auto mechanic job and it's horrible. Big tech is iffy. I'm just not into tech at all and don't care to hear about it. And many tech bros lack a lot of social skills, sorry to say. Gynecologist, looking at other women's genitalia all day. Garbage man or porta potty servicing, stinky, politician, anything religious. Anything that results in long-distance relationship issues is gone all the time, erratic schedules, etc. I'm sure there's a lot more. Story 33. Realtor, entrepreneur, guide, designer, amongst others. Realtor speaks for itself, slimy, fake, and thinks their job is hard to do and requires expertise, usually former athlete. Entrepreneur, same as above, but also probably silver spoon rich and never done real work. Not to say this is true for all actual entrepreneurs, just ones that call themselves that in their dating profiles. Guide, rock climbing guide, ski guide, mountain guide, fishing guide, etc., etc. Niche to mountain towns, maybe? But all Peter Pans all the way, all the time, very self-centered typically. Bonus is typically very patient. Designer, less consistently bad and more personal. Gripe, not typically empathetic and very opinionated. Too aesthetically oriented in everything. Rather than working on relationships, they work on how well their relationships work. As in all things, these are stereotypical examples, exceptions possible. Story 34. I live in NYC. Bartender, they have intimate relationships with everyone in sight. Comedians, 99% of the time, they have been told they're funny and should try stand-up. They are not funny and have weird, huge egos with low self-esteem. English professors, I've dated two, both of which were writing their own mythology books, extremely pompous, critical of everything. Both were rude to waiters. Lawyers, I have dated two, both were freaky without asking me my preferences. I tend to prefer blue-collar men, but finding a blue-collar man who is liberal is tough. I have like all the engineers I have dated. Story 35. Not a red flag, more of a yellow flag, but I'm hesitant about people in helping professions, teaching, doctors, nurses, therapists, etc., because a depressingly high number of people enter those professions specifically to misuse power over vulnerable people. Not only have I had painful experiences with them as a student and patient, but most people who have mistreated me in personal relationships have been teachers or aspiring therapists. At this point, anyone with mental health advocate in their job bio is a red flag to me now. Story 36. I don't consider any jobs a red flag. The person's character, curiosity, humor, honesty, kindness, communication, and so on are far important to me. Having said that, any job that goes against my principles would make dating difficult. So any dishonest jobs, illegal jobs, or jobs that harm others, that wouldn't work. But I can't imagine being interested in such a person in the first place. Story 37. Law enforcement, medical attorney, restaurant worker. As someone who's been in and around these fields, I've heard, seen, and experienced things that have led me to not date anyone with any of these jobs. Law and medical are around some of the craziest experiences to have, and you're exposed to so much ugly and drama, and it's all a bonding thing. Restaurant workers, I mean, come on. We've all had an intimate relationship with someone who worked with food, whether it was on the dock or not at all. It's just a thing. Story 38. Any woman working with hair. Anecdotally, growing up, my parents would take me to great clips, and all I heard from those ladies during my haircut was gossip about their exes and how men suck. I remember thinking to myself, if all these women have exes that they're talking crap about, maybe they're the issue. I'm sorry if this isn't always the case, but boy, do I hear it a lot, and that caused me to never want to date a woman in the haircutting/styling industry. Story 39. Besides the obvious, which probably goes for both genders, people who contribute absolutely nothing to society, stockbroker, HR, influencer, etc. I would never date a police officer again. Those women are completely nuts and in it only for the power trip. It might sound hot at first, but having an actually power-hungry feminist person who brags about how good it feels to be able to get revenge on men on their job, things quickly become weird and you feel really unsafe. For some time, you smile and nod, but getting out of a relationship with someone who could ruin yours and your family's and friends' lives and appears to be willing to do that without batting an eye, it's challenging. I did it by starting to act like what she called a little weak person, so she actually broke up with me because she wanted a real man. Stay away from them. It also applies to male cops even though they appear a bit more mentally stable. Story 40. I don't want to paint the entire board with red flags, but as self-realizations grow, I'm only interested in dating other DJs, music producers, content creators, and frankly, I just don't see anything long-term working out where work and personal life can't remain tightly coupled in such a way. A corporate slave is going to be too burnt out from the whipping all day to go enjoy their evening and away from the couch, and then bed and the work versus interpersonal schedules aren't going to facilitate for much enjoyed mutual time spent. I realize and recognize this line of work for many is a secondary nighttime job, stretching their interpersonal even more, but all that does is show me that they have the moxie to get it instead of atrophy on the couch at home. And if it's your primary line of work, I really ought to have a ring in a box on deck. Story 41. Oh, anything in the medical industry, especially people trying to be RNs. She stole my car once and threw a literal tantrum in front of all of her friends because I walked over to her house to get it. It was the morning of my dad's funeral. She thought it was funny the next day. Funny. The actual red flag is people who swear up and down they're interested. Nobody is interested. They all want an ATM and free rides, but don't fall for it. Stay single. Story 42. A true red flag, landlords, parasites. I wouldn't be able to get over the damage they do to working class people. Consultant, not a productive member of society. Anything affiliated to conservatism, policy writer, campaign managers, etc. for obvious reasons. Jobs I considered a red flag for myself, but they are not objectively. DJ, never have seen or met a DJ who wasn't a loser. Any job that works weekends. I work a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I want us both to have weekends off. Professors, stupid long work hours, bad pay. Teachers, nothing wrong with teachers, but it wouldn't fit with my lifestyle. I would hate for my primary vacation time to be when all the kids are off, so every typical vacation slot is busy. Also, long hours, bad pay, and no upwards mobility. Story 43. Landlord, property manager, real estate. There's a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram. I figure cops, CEOs, adult entertainers, and the like are already covered in other comments, but one thing I haven't seen is people who get paid mostly by doing nothing, and then capitalizing on something we should be considered a basic human right. The one time I tried to date someone who rented houses was also full of red flags. Never once did I see her reach for her wallet. And when she found out I like to work with my hands, she started hinting about house repairs that she needed done. Lady, I make armor and I forge tools. Find someone else to re-stucco your darn wall. Story 44. I dated a woman who got into streaming while we were together, and while it wasn't the singular reason for our breakup, it was a big factor. It went from a hobby to being so much more as she started getting larger following. Last I checked, she had a few thousand followers, so not massive by any means, but it was nearly all she thought about and talked about. It was exhausting and ended up feeling like it was a necessary to the front she put on them. Never again. Story 45. Someone who does a job that has a certain smell/uncleanliness, so when they come home, for example, a garbage man will smell like garbage, and I've seen too many men who work with their hands that live with dirty hands that have calluses, blisters, and dirty fingernails. I'm just not attracted and can't go around someone who comes home and smelly every day, and then needs to have a deep, clean shower before they can hug me. Also, someone who works in a very emotional, macabre environment like a morgue or something would just turn me off. Story 46. Having dated people who work in police, nursing, and ambulance services, them, plus doctors, fire people, etc. Those jobs from the women I've dated will work some darn awful hours. They are almost permanently overlooked and exhausted, so it's a nightmare doing anything. And don't get me wrong, there are some bright spots where work patterns, etc. fall nicely and they have the energy to go places and do things, but apart from my experience, it can really be hard. Now that being said, I'd also say to every man you should date someone in those professions at some point, because they can also be by far the most loving and attentive people you'll ever date too. Story 47. Working nights or traveling for work? Can't do it. Why am I dating someone just to not see them? Also, cops in the military. Grew up in a military family. Tri-care isn't worth it. My best friend asked me to marry him when he was in the military. Asexual and aromantic and adopt my kid, and while it was tempting and I know he would have never been cruel, the idea of having to move wherever the government demanded would make me lose it. Sometimes I wonder if I made a bad decision, but now I own my home and I have roots. I've never had this as a kid. I like this. Story 48. An actor or comedian. Actors can't turn it off. I was cast in a movie, but I'm not an actor. And watching them interact offset was mind-blowing. No one was really talking to each other, just fighting for who could be the center of attention. And then after watching someone cry on cue, and then turn it off and back on, it's like, child, you play too much. I can't trust you. How did you learn to do that so well? It's just, disturbing. All my comedian friends are super dark when they're not making jokes and or extremely sarcastic and cruel. And dark, did I mention dark? And also pretty bitter about being funny, which I get. Once it becomes your job, you don't want to be an unpaid clown, but it's like they either can't be serious when it's time to be, or they're too serious or resent the idea that people expect them to be funny if they're not getting paid for it. Story 49. According to one of the therapists I dated, people study psychology because they subconsciously believe that learning about psychology will fix all the crap that's seriously wrong with them. The woman who told me this thought she was the exception to that rule. Okay, yeah. After dating a therapist and a psychiatrist, I can tell you with great certainty that I'd never, ever do it again. Dating a lawyer is a daily argument waiting to happen, but at least a lawyer is willing to admit when they're wrong, assuming you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Story 50. A social media influencer. I briefly dated one a few years ago and he was about a year into his content. He wasn't a bad guy or anything, but he seemed obsessed with creating an image. A passion is great and all, but it all came to the moment when he mentioned that he was dating someone in 2 videos. He asked to post a video and include my hand as a nonchalant sneak peek. He said we would eventually move towards a full reveal if we got more serious. I immediately said no. I explained that I don't want an online relationships and how I wouldn't know if his actions or feelings would be sincere or for clout. He understood, thankfully, and removed the videos, edited the parts out, and reposted them. He had over 500 followers at the time, so it wasn't like they were invested in his life to the point where they would ask questions. He was really cool about it. Sometimes when I'm doom scrolling, a video of his will pop up. He's gained a couple of thousand followers since, and good for him. He is a good guy, and I genuinely hope he finds or has found someone who's okay with that sort of lifestyle. Story 51. Doctors and other people in the medical field. Yeah, it's hot that they save lives and earn a lot of money, but having been raised by them and seeing how much they prioritize their job over anything else, it's hard. My parents always got home really late and had 24 to 48-hour shifts constantly. And even when they were home, they were always on the phone and talking to patients or other doctors. I need someone who I can rely on that I know will prioritize me instead of work and to be there for me. Someone with a normal 8 to 5 work schedule. Story 52. Mail delivery workers, aka UPS, FedEx, USPS, Amazon, DHL drivers. Long hours, I'm talking 10 plus hours a day. 5 to 6 days a week, cheating with sort workers / door-to-door customers. Can't tell you how many times I've walked up on conversations about so-and-so at this address, or this business is hot and they're working on it, or they should get some of that. Or the flirting banter with any female sort workers. They're usually overworked, stressed, and miserable. I've seen it firsthand. They aren't all bad, but a lot of them actually are. Story 53. Male musicians. I never met a more up-their-own-butt group of individuals. I was at a party long ago and some regionally known Christian hipster person who played a giant violin thing, the cello maybe, while doing some slam poetry imposed himself on me. His pants were tighter than mine, and the v-neck of his shirt would have had the church ladies clutching their pearls. The look of superiority and condescension, how he thought that I was so lucky to have garnered his attention, trying to be deep and asking what my goal was. No, my ultimate dream in life was doing this best smolder. In the flattest, most serious tone, I confided in him that my dream was to become a trophy wife, specifically of Donald Trump. Ironically, this was long before he did that whole political thing. The look he gave me was one who had just had his cranium cracked open and someone used the bathroom into his brain. I got up and walked away, never saw or spoke to him again. Sometimes I wonder if he wrote terrible slam poetry of our encounter. Story 54. I wouldn't be turned off by any legitimate profession, but I definitely see why couples who both work 9 to 5 kind of jobs typically last longer than couples who have odd hours. It's all about what works for you. But a consistent schedule and a job that doesn't stress that person out is what I'd want in a partner. I, in general, would not date truck drivers, doctors, or lawyers or anything restaurant related. Could I make exceptions? Sure, truck drivers can run local and be at home at a set time. It happens. A girl who manages a breakfast cafe and is home by 2 p.m. every day? Sure. A medical professional that doesn't allow the stress of the job get in the way of a meaningful relationship? I could take it. But in general, would I want a woman who lives on the road or works weird hours or who is stressed out of her mind at a job to the point where she can't be a pleasant person to be around? No, life's too short to deal with that. Story 55. My boyfriend is a somewhat well-known musician, so if I'm ever single again, Anyone who has a fan base is a no-go for me. It takes a special sort of self-confidence and security in the relationship to be able to watch the person you love be fawned over by other women, be ignored by fans as they push through to try to hug and give their number to my boyfriend, watch them leave their thirst comments on his post, and just be outwardly disrespectful in general. Something about being in the limelight dehumanizes people to the masses. I'd have already left if he were any other man, but he's so incredibly respectful of me and our relationship that he leaves absolutely no room for doubt, even amongst all the clamoring women. Story 56. Junior doctor. They don't know who they are or what they're doing yet. Consultant? Depends on which specialty. No, this is not related to money whatsoever. It's about personality and work hours. Also, police officer, maybe also lawyer, but again, probably depends on their area of specialization, personality, and work hours. It's all about who you are as a person, your ability to be present in the relationship, your ego, that sort of thing. But if you still want to assume I'm just digging for gold, that's your choice too. Story 57. I think I've made it to an age where I wouldn't date someone who doesn't have a regular work schedule anymore. I'm currently dating someone with a schedule that changes from week to week. It's pretty annoying not knowing when they're going to be free week to week. I pretty much can't buy tickets for anything early or plan ahead. Had to change Valentine's Day plans last minute because they couldn't get the day off and ended up having to stay later than usual. We got to the restaurant 45 minutes before closing, so we had to rush. Then we checked into the hotel late and went to sleep because she was tired from her long shift. Story 58. I personally find civil servants such as paramedics, police, etc. are the kind I would avoid. Not necessarily because of anything to do with the jobs in theory, because they are all important roles for society, but more the hours and burnout from such jobs making a romantic life incredibly difficult to navigate for a lot of people. If I never wanted to actually see my partner awake, I'd just be single. Also, that in some cases, job roles such as that with a lot of long hours and set teams can lead to emotional conflicts of interest and higher chances of infidelity. Especially when every time you go home, you probably don't actually get any time to do anything to maintain the affection in your relationship, but your work husband is with you 14 hours a day to eat with you, work with you, and share in your feelings of isolation. If it wasn't obvious, I am indeed talking from experience. Story 59. Cops, unless they're a detective or deal with white-collar crime. Realtor, audit, entertainer of some kind, not because there's anything wrong with that line of work or due to jealousy, but because of existing irrational stigmas resulting in it tending to attract folks with baggage, desperation, mental health issues disproportionately. Anybody involved in an MLM at all to any extent, pastor, priest, religious anything, psychic, palm reader, astrologer, etc., naturopath, acupuncturist, chiropractors, etc., life coaches, wellness coaches, etc. Not that there aren't good people among those in the above professions or most of the above professions who would be a perfectly good partner for me. But because I'm not willing to roll the dice on finding a good one when I can focus elsewhere and be less likely to have wasted my time. Story 60. Hairdresser. Yep, sorry. Do you want some raw honesty? Before I met my wife and got married, I was single for a stretch. I lived in a medium to large US city, and it really started to feel like every single woman over 30 was a hairdresser. Easily 10 or 20 dates in a row. What do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a beautician. And yeah, I'm going to say this. It's sad because some of these women were clearly way too intelligent for this type of job, which, as someone dating them, felt like throwing away your potential. So many of them were very heavy drinkers. I'll take your downvotes now. Please form a line to the left. Story 61. Honestly, if you require a professional to keep you from dating someone, you're probably already in trouble. Those conversations should really start with parents setting a good example for their children and talking to them about making positive and healthy choices in the relationships they pursue, but I'm not sure that's what the best user's question was really asking. I assume that would fall under the purview of local law enforcement, so most likely police and/or sheriff. If the situation is more specific or if there are extenuating circumstances, the terms of any arrangement would most likely be determined by a prosecutor and signed off by a judge. And if any of these stories got to you too, here's more for you. YouTube thinks we're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.